Good evening and welcome to yet another episode of Kam Ki Baat. This Kam Ki Baat is being hosted by the Awaken India movement, and we are doing this special series on the GM crops. We have been discussing about the GM crops, what are the problems, and why we need to be worried about them. And today we have a special guest. And this lady had been fighting on behalf of the people of India in the Supreme Court since 2005. And her name is uh, Miss Aruna Rodrigues. Uh, Aruna Rodrigues, she has been an economist and she has been a management consultant in various high level positions in many corporate sectors. She worked both in India and the Gulf, in multiple countries. And so it is very, very interesting to see that being a very high profile corporate executive, she had chosen to work on the issues of the people of India. Welcome to our show, Arunaji. Please, thank you for joining us tonight. And we are very, very happy that you have joined us. So, Arunaji, to begin with, you had been an economist and a project and marketing consultant, and you also founded this company called Sunray Harvesters, which is a solar photovoltaic solutions company. So you've been a business, I mean, you've been in the business environment, you've been in very high profile jobs in the corporate sector in both in India and abroad. So what is it that motivated you? Of course, you had worked later on various other environmental issues to find solutions for large dams and even for the Konkan Railway, how it might interact with the habitat and such other things. But what is it that prompted you? Because since 2005, you have been pursuing the issue of the genetically modified crops or GM crops. So, what is it that motivated you to take up this issue?
Um, a side matter that has absorbed me all my life is nutrition and healing. We come from a long line of doctors, so maybe that has some genetic impact on. Um, I started to get, and the environment has always been an issue. I'm very, very fond of jungles and trees and birds, and just naturally, like everyone should be. And I started to get data on something called GMOs, and it began to worry me because they talked about it impacting the quality of our food. So one day I was sitting with all this stuff, and it occurred to me that if I had a plate of salad, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be sure what I was handing out if it was had a GM content, and that's what drew me into this.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about your journey? Because you are the key petitioner, the lead petitioner in this court, this public interest litigation in the Supreme Court. So there are various ways that people go about this, like people like us, we try to educate people to create public opinion, etc. First, two questions. One, how did you approach the Supreme Court directly? Because there has to be a process, right? Normally, what they say is that you need to go to the local courts, and then, then only sometimes some people go to the Supreme Court. I mean, this is my layman's understanding. So, and you are also not a subject expert as far as you're concerned, because normally for public interest litigations, they would want people who had some relation with this. Generally, that is accepted.
Quite
So,
right.
so how did the Supreme Court accept your case, first thing, and how did it strike you to even go to the Supreme Court directly?
Well, first of all, when I came back from India, I found I knew nobody. The first thing I did was contact 10 or 12 leading, and I mean leading scientists in the world, and ask them whether they would help out in terms of affidavits, letters, documents, memos. And I didn't expect any replies, to tell you the truth, because I came from nowhere. They didn't know who I was. And suddenly they get an email from somebody. I gave some kind of background, of course. And believe it or not, 11 out of the 13 replied. including in them was from the Salk Institute, David Schubert, Jack Heinemann, and a whole load of others who came in. So now that I had them in, I sent them individual emails to say I needed a briefing on their topic of expertise. Well, the first email I got back was from Professor Dave Schubert from the famous Salk Institute. And my heart just sank. I didn't understand a word of what he said. I only understood the verbs that connected the sentences. So I wrote back. I said, Professor Schubert, my apologies. I forgot to tell you that I'm not a scientist. I'm an economist. I'm many faltu things, but I'm not a scientist. You know, he wrote back immediately and apologized. He said, my apologies, you will have a new document in 24 hours. And that is how I started. They taught me. I asked questions, they replied. I was then able to put together a 100-page document. I went to Delhi and walked the streets. I didn't know any lawyers. Someone met me and said, there happens to be a Prashant Bhushan across the road. So I just walked into his office. And that is how this started.
So, because normally what we say, especially for filing public interest litigations, there are a lot of constraints. You know, they're not easily accepted, and that now this is the Supreme Court, because we've been trying on various other issues with our courts in the High Court in Telangana. So accepting a public interest litigation, let's say if it was a scientist, like maybe some Dr. Bhargava or somebody going to the Supreme Court knocking on it, they could say that there is a cause of reason to knock on the doors. So didn't the court ask you as an economist, what is your locus standi? Come to the Supreme Court.
They asked me, sorry, I beg your pardon, did I interrupt you?
No, that's it. That's what. So what? How did? Because, yes,
Okay.
yes, please.
Yes, they did ask me, and I was in court, and Prashant was there. Who I was, what I was, why I was, where I was, possible questions, and I gave them a history of what I do and what I have done, and they accepted it.
Wonderful. So now, ma'am, tell me, how was the case going on, and what is the status as on date with the case?
Right.
I mean, you can tell what you're allowed to speak, because I know the case is still in the court. So
No, we are allowed to speak. No,
Okay.
that's a misnomer. This is public data. It's public information. I can say exactly it's all in the public domain.
Okay.
There have been a number of submissions made in the last 17 years. The first order we got was very, very quick in 2006, putting a dampener on the apex regulator, the GAC, because they were not involved in approving the crop for environmental release. One of the other regulators was doing it, and Prashant got a stay order immediately. So to go forward, that only the apex regulator can move a GM crop for environmental release. No other regulators are allowed to do so. As the case went forward, we got into there were two parallel issues which came up for the last 14 years. One was mustard, and the other was BT brinjal in parallel. And we had to drop one for the other depending on what the emergency was. And BT brinjal became the emergent crop that we had to deal with. Well, we were very, very fortunate. Providence came into this because there was a change of environment minister, and Jairam Ramesh came in at the time when we were given permission to have a technical expert committee. That is the process that went through with Jairam Ramesh. And he also, all these 12 scientists, the public, the biosafety data was put in the public domain. So all these 12 scientists were able to pile on and appraise the data. That data was sent to Jairam Ramesh and formed a large part of his decision-making process. And he called a moratorium on BT brinjal. we got the tech rolling, we got a terms of reference rolling. Three of our scientists were part of the tech process as well, because they were allowed to send in documents. And then we come now very quickly to mustard X number of years later, where Pentel has been in contempt of court repeatedly and is in contempt of court again, because apparently they have released mustard, or planted mustard is more accurate, in six places, I think.
Without pepper. This was clandestine?
I don't know what is clandestine anymore with the regulators. Clandestine is made legal, and legal is made illegal if the decision goes against them. So it's not a question of clandestine. They are so brazen that they do things now in contempt of court. It's the only word to use. They're brazen. So we are going to have to ask for uprooting as well before it reaches firing stage.
So right now they have agreed. So as on date, I mean, after the moratorium was going on for the last 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, or 12 years.
Only brinjal.
Okay,
Saraswati, that's only on BT brinjal.
Not on all the GM crops?
No, not at all. Only BT brinjal.
Okay, but then there was still a the tech committee also recommended that there should be a prohibition on the environmental release of HT crops, including DMH11 and its parental lines and variants, right?
True.
If I'm not mistaken. And that was the Supreme Court's tech committee.
That's right.
In
fact, let me put that a little more succinctly.
Yeah.
It's the Environment Ministry that submitted a proposal to the Supreme Court that this tech committee with this set of TORs, terms of reference, should be appointed. So the Supreme Court merely implemented what the Ministry of Environment had asked for.
Yeah. No, so my question is, technically, if the Supreme Court, a tech committee that was appointed by the Supreme Court has recommended a prohibition, has this been accepted by the Supreme Court? Was there an order passed to that effect?
Nothing has happened. The Supreme Court hasn't heard this case for X number of years. And from 2018, when we got back into mustard, that was after another gap from 2016. The tech report has not been adjudicated, and the recommendations have not been, as I said, adjudicated at the moment.
Okay. But then not just one committee. I think there were multiple committees. One was the Jairam Ramesh report. Of course, he talked about the moratorium on BT brinjal. Then, as you had mentioned, the Soproy committee report in August 2012. The Parliamentary Standing Committee also recommended that there should be a prohibition until the safety guidelines or whatever, the safety has been established.
Two parliamentary standing committees. There
was one more in 2017. There was one more in 2017, and of course the technical expert committee that was appointed that was the latest report, that was in 2013, which has recommended a 10-year moratorium on the commercial release of all the GM crops. So that means the 10-year period would actually expire maybe 2023.
No.
So there was nothing ratified by there was no interim order.
Can I just clarify this? Because
yes.
It's a disinformation which has been planted by the opposition. The moratorium starts when the and the conditions which have been imposed by the tech are implemented. Nothing has been implemented. So the moratorium 10 years hasn't started at all.
At all. No. So this was my understanding.
Till today, this is the disinformation. 10 years.
Yeah.
They have not implemented the conditions imposed by the recommend at all. There have been two parliamentary standing committees. The
Yeah.
2012 was a very, very important. They asked for all field trials to be stopped forthwith. Forthwith.
Yes, but despite that, have they been doing these field trials?
Not
All
only
these.
doing field trials, we've got illegal planting on commercial scale for 14 years, and the GAC just looks the other way.
So this means that this
14 years.
The HT mustard was already being planted.
No, no, not I said illegal GMO crops. I didn't say mustard.
It could be other
It's
crops.
HT cotton. Now, this is important because it's a herbicide tolerant crop.
Yeah.
And it's been there for 14 years, if or thereabouts. And they've just looked the other way and they've done nothing about it. So it suits them to bring GM and plant it in this way, and we face a fait accompli.
Okay. So where does democracy stand? I mean, a parliamentary standing committee has recommended that they should not be planted, they should not be introduced, and then things happen. So, and
I just
GAC.
I have two words. What democracy?
True. Okay. So now at this juncture, some more technical information we require from you is we are talking about why are we worried about GM crops first, GM mustard, which we are talking about the D. This is called the DH mustard or DMH mustard.
DMH11. DMH11.
11 mustard. What is the particular danger posed by that? And what is the difference between the HT mustard and a regular GM crop? Could you just throw some light on that? What is the yeah.
At the moment, we have basically two kinds of crops in the world. 99%. One is like BT cotton, which is an insect-resistant crop, supposedly, and the other is a herbicide-resistant crop. The herbicide crops take up more than 80% of planting worldwide. They're the main ones. And the BT are the other 20, or a combination of both, like HT-BT.
Oh,
Yeah?
okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Now, the problem with mustard, we have managed to keep out every other GMO from Indian agriculture to cotton, which was introduced in 2002. Nothing else is legal. HT mustard will be the first food crop that they are trying to commercialize, and in a herbicide tolerant crop. Now, herbicide tolerant crops are devastating for the environment. They are toxic. They are cancer causing. There are 100,000 cases unwinding in the US Supreme Court right now and other few places in the world because glyphosate, which is also Bayer and Monsanto, because Bayer bought over Monsanto, glyphosate has been called by the International Cancer Research Institute, it's called IARC, International Agency for Research on Cancer. It's a body of the WHO. They've called it a probable carcinogenic. There are 100,000 cases demanding compensation because people have cancers. Now, glufosinate is much more toxic than glyphosate. And glyphosate is considered the safest of all herbicides. So that tells you glufosinate is a neurotoxin.
so
It's
first
cancer causing.
sorry. So I'm just trying to understand. Originally, the herbicide tolerant crops were using the Roundup Ready, which is the glyphosate, right? Am I right on that?
Basically, 90%, 95% of all crops were herbicide tolerant to glyphosate.
Yeah. So ever since glyphosate has been the bad guy, now are they trying to say that HT crops are going to use in collaboration with glufosinate?
By glufosinate. No, to be fair, I don't think they're trying to say because the demons are out to get glyphosate, so we will come out with glufosinate. It's not the kind of story I'm about to project at all.
Okay, no, I'm
However,
just trying to clarify on
yeah,
that.
no. They know that glufosinate is much more toxic than glyphosate. They couldn't care a damn. Sorry for using four-letter words on public television, but this is the whole purpose of this regulator. They don't care. And the kind of fraudulent data that they have given out in various trials that have come up before the commercial process was evolving is something extraordinary. It's totally, totally, the data cannot be justified at all. All of this is in the Supreme Court. So you ask me questions and I'll reply as to what exactly your audience wants to know. On
Yeah.
glufosinate, on
Yeah.
mustard. Mustard, don't forget, mustard is an oil seed.
Yeah.
Mustard, sarso, kachi dhani, and all of this will go for a 6. It will be into our food supply. We
Yeah.
use it in Ayurveda. We use raw mustard. It is the most devastating thing that they
So
could be
mustard
doing.
is used in every tadka. Every seasoning goes with
Forget the
mustard.
tarka. At least the tarka is cooked. It's used raw. Mustard is eaten raw. It's used in Ayurveda. And we
Yeah.
are a center of origin for mustard. We've got over just under 6,000 species variations on mustard in our seeds. So we are a
Yes.
center of origin, and it will
Yeah. Like
contaminate all of that,
the
like
brinjal.
rice. Like
Yeah.
rice. Yeah,
Like rice, like brinjal. Now, I
correct.
wanted to ask you one more question. There is a technical matter here. Now, what is this? There are two genes that have been used here, right? One is a terminator sterile technology, and the other says it's a fertility inducing gene. Now, how can these two be used in the same crop? And what is this outcome?
Okay. First of all, it's not a terminator. That's not a word we can use for this particular, it would be technically wrong.
Okay.
What it is that mustard is a closed pollinating crop.
Okay.
In other words, but it does outcross fairly well, about 20% or thereabouts. What this means is that it forms hybrids before you can get to it.
Okay. It
So
falls.
it's difficult to,
It does its own hybrids, you mean?
it does its own hybridization.
Okay.
So if you want to make a particular hybrid, not that you can't do it, but these guys want to do it as easily as 2 pennies. So they've got to work a little harder.
Mhm.
But the thing to remember is mustard is not a hybrid technology. It's a hybrid making technology. It's easier if you put in a sterile gene like Barney's,
Mhm.
and then you put in the fertility restorer when you want to make your hybrid.
Oh,
The
so they both are
fertility
not used
restorer,
together.
they are used in one parent and parent and both together. Now there's a third gene. The third gene is glufosinate, the resistance to glufosinate.
Okay,
So there are 3 genes in this, not 2.
not two. So, what could it matter? How can it impact the, we are all, like we mentioned, that there are 5,277 varieties of mustard in this country. How could this impact? Like now they are giving this commercial, it is actually supposed to be open field trials, or is it commercial release, as in they're going to sell it to all the farmers, or
Well,
is it
at the
going
moment, they planted out the parents, Barney's, Basta, in order to make their hybrid DMH11. That's what DMH11 is the hybrid of the 2 parents.
Okay, so this is
Okay.
in only in some pockets, and later they want to sell that. I mean, is the
So they
commercial?
planted out the parents and they will make the hybrid later. So we came into this immediately because they're in contempt of court. In 2018, we had a verbal order that they would do nothing until the government came back to the Supreme Court. There are 4 orders in this case.
Yeah, so that means until the Supreme Court gives its final
They
verdict,
were
they are
not
not
supposed to do anything. No.
anything at all. So what does this mean now for our regular? Because in Punjab, Haryana, even in our Telangana, in many places, there are farmers who are growing normal, regular mustard, and in fact, this is the season, right? So what could be the impact?
In 4 or 5 years, our mustard will be entirely contaminated. Now, let me give you the example of Canada. There, they have a seed which is very, very similar, but it's not the same family at all. It's called rapeseed.
Okay.
Rapeseed is also very, very tiny seeds. Insects love it because it's got sticky pollen.
Mhm.
In 7 years, the whole of Canada was contaminated. 7 years, just 7 years.
So this means that as consumers, let's say the farmers will lose their ability to save their original seeds, and the
That's right.
consumers and the consumers will lose their ability to eat what they want to eat.
But consumers never had any ability at all. They're
I mean,
given
and the
food.
choice. I would say the choice.
They have no choice, and this would not be labeled. The
Yes.
Supreme Court is all about labeling as well
Yeah.
of
So they are not
imports.
labeled. They have not
Not,
labeled it.
well, BT cotton seed oil is not labeled,
Yeah,
and
I
the
know. They
Parliamentary
need to
Standing
put everything.
Committee of 2012 took it up very strongly with the FSSAI and the GA. You put out 1.2 of GM cottonseed oil, and it's being mixed with all kinds of oils, and you eat it.
Yeah. So so how do we what do you think we can do other than, of course, we
Well,
are
I'm in
waiting?
court. We've got another order. They're not supposed to do anything. So I'm
So,
back in court on the 29th. God
mhm.
willing, we will get something sterling.
Oh,
God willing.
I
Yeah.
really hope that some great things should happen, that we
Yeah.
get some good order, and we
Right.
manage to. So now we have to even uproot these whatever has been
Now
planted.
we will have to ask for this.
We have
Let
to
me
ask.
tell you what we're asking for in the orders. That
Yeah,
all HT crops are stopped, banned, barred.
that's wonderful. I
Field
hope.
trials are stopped.
So one more question I had was what could be the impact of on health? See, they're saying that we are bringing in HD mustard because it's a high yield. Can you hear me? Hello?
Can you repeat
Uh,
the question? Can you
yeah,
repeat the
I'm
question?
just starting. I'm just starting. So these people are claiming that this DMH11 mustard is a high yielding variety. It is going to create. It is for the high yield. What is the purpose that they are stating? Is it really about yield? Of course, you mentioned that it is about hybridization or creating an easy method to bring in the hybrids. What is this? What is the story that they are telling us? Why? What is the need for
Okay.
bringing in this DMH11 now?
Okay. Can I just backtrack a little to BT cotton in terms
Please.
of the socio-economic impacts it has had on our farmers? It's about patents. On
Oh,
it's all about patents. BT cotton in royalties has cost our farmers something around 14,000 crores extra. That's what the farmers have paid hybrid BT cotton for the last. They moved from BT cotton, they tried the same gambit in BT brinjal. They failed. So now they're coming into mustard on the ruse that they will make a better hybrid. Now let me, and my TI was answered by the Directorate of Rapeseed Mustard in Bharatpur in
mhm.
2016. Hybrids take a certain knowledge on the part of a breeder. It's not as though you take a high yielding side and on the other, automatically hybrid, not at all. It's a question of how the genes function and interact with each other. Now, in non-GM, we've also got sterilization technologies. So they don't need GM sterilization. We've got what is called this, I think it's, just a minute, let me check what it's called. It's some high-sounding name. Or the other.
This
It's
can be
non-GM sterilizing technology. Sorry?
no. Somebody was asking,
Can't
can
hear
this
you.
be recorded? Someone was saying if they can record this. I said yes, you can record. I'm
Of
just
course,
answering.
of course,
Of course,
of course.
of course, you can record it. No problem.
It's called the
Yes.
cytoplasmic male sterility system outside GMO. But as every breeder will tell you, we don't need hybrids. The government actually agreed in a submission and reply to us that they never claimed that their hybrid mustard DMH11 out yielded any of our varieties or GM. Or how are they doing this?
So what is
The
the logic?
data.
No. So what is the logical?
No idea.
What is the logical answer to
There
that?
is no logic. There is no logic except a ruse. Bring
And
out
what is
another GMO and another GMO and open the door to herbicide tolerant crops. There is no reason at all for this mustard.
so?
Besides, it's a GM crop. GM crops are toxic.
Right.
Given.
No.
That's given.
So their motive is one, to promote the herbicides, and two, to patent their seeds, because once the contamination
That's right.
happens, once the
Absolutely.
contamination happens, as it happened in Canada, they sued the farmers for stealing their seeds, right?
That's right.
This is
That's right. But in
so.
India,
But
you
then,
can't do that because we are
yeah,
small scale farmers, so you can't do that. So they'll do what they did with hybrid BT cotton. They
which is
had
what
12,000 hybrids in these 20 years they put out, causing absolute confusion. And the yields have dropped. BT cotton has failed, definitively failed. There's a Supreme Court submission by us with proof that it has failed. The person behind that analysis was the famous Professor Andy Guterres. We've been very lucky in this. We've been very lucky with the scientists who've joined us. He joined us about 5 years ago and tried to help.
So now in this scenario, let's look at BT cotton.
Yeah.
We have seen that it has failed. Okay, there is no danger of the companies suing the farmers, but is there now a possibility for people to take a step back and go back to try and retrieve our desi varieties?
Absolutely. Our desi varieties are there, and the CSIR know this extremely well. They've actually experimented and given desi varieties and other non-GM hybrids, not hybrids, varieties, straight line varieties, and they have worked. They have worked. This is a government stroke regulatory conspiracy to force, with America's pushing in the background and the foreground, to force GM crops into India so that the whole food system now is available to these patented crops. This is the whole purpose.
So what I'm trying to understand is, so these people basically, do they want to control our entire food system, our agriculture? What is it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Entire food, if it's GM, they control our agriculture.
How could that happen? How will it be played out?
Because of contamination, Saraswati. Once you start an HT crop, it'll flood the country. Hybrids, we don't need these hybrids. They will just mushroom like the BT cotton hybrids mushroomed, and farmers won't have a choice.
But like you mentioned just now, we have our desi varieties in cotton. So
Yes.
can't the farmers now go back to, is there not
They
a
will have to, of course they can, but they are not individuals just fighting on their own, little farmers. They need the backing of our
government?
scientists and our government. What's happening? How can you
Yeah.
just put this burden on the farmers? They will
No, no,
have to leave their they'll have to leave their grounds fallow for 2 or 3 years. They'll have to
oh,
restore their soils. They can't plant, as someone said, BT cotton doesn't succeed unless some dal or lentil is first planted, which gives the soil the right nourishment for BT cotton to give some yield. Just look at this. There are stories within stories in this whole issue.
and so many farmers have committed
And
suicides. We
so
know.
many farmers have committed suicide.
So the restoration of our biodiversity, of our food systems, in case the HT crops do come out, is definitely again dependent on the government, because in India we don't have such strong. I mean, of course, there are lots of farmers networks who are trying to
But
recover the seeds,
see,
but it is in a very
see,
small scale.
two-thirds of our farmers are small-scale farmers. You and I can't do anything when the government comes up with peculiar policies. What are they going to do? They need water, they need electricity, they need help, they need scientific inputs, they
Yes.
need visits by scientists. We need a healthy government farming, healthy environment to push this. Either that
So
or farmers must come out on the road, all of them, and sit down.
yes,
What
like
what
what
can
we
we
did
do?
with the farm laws, maybe.
It's very
But
difficult. It's
it was
very
very
difficult.
difficult. I know because I've been working with farmers at the grassroots.
Right,
We know what
right.
it is. So now, one last crucial question before we answer some of the questions. One very interesting question has come from a person in Costa Rica. So, regarding the HT, now with BT, we are still having some choice, some chance of trying to recover the Desi beej, and we can do that. But with
Yes.
HT, what I heard with the HT is that any other crop other than the HT resistant crop would be destroyed, which means, like, if as a farmer, if I'm growing the native variety mustard and my neighboring farmer is growing a HT mustard, then it could even kill my own mustard crop, right?
You need to understand why. Because there is
Can
drift.
it happen?
It's called
Sorry, your voice is breaking.
of farm.
You please
It
repeat.
will
Can
go
you
into your, it'll go into your neighbor's farm. It's called herbicide drift. You spray A in place A, you can't retain it in place A. There's wind, there's all kinds of things. If it goes into their farm and they don't have a herbicide tolerant crop because they've got a natural mustard crop, it'll kill it. And it'll kill all other microorganisms as well.
Yeah, so that means
So it's
the HT crops are even more dangerous than the regular
much
BT.
more because it's open to the environment. The spray is open to the environment.
And what can it do to the bees? Because something we are talking about the pollinators, that with the BT cotton already there has been a lot of impact on the pollinators. Can you?
They're toxic to bees. The bees will die.
And one hears that
HT
there's also.
glufosinate is banned in the EU. It's banned in many places around the world.
But it's allowed.
Glyphosate is also toxic to bees, but glufosinate, absolutely.
And it's cancer causing. And we hear already that in Punjab and Haryana, they're having to hire beekeepers from Himachal Pradesh to come and help them in pollinating, to bring their bee boxes.
Quite possible. I don't know about this, but quite possible.
I
But
heard
there
about
is
this.
another angle to this HT crop, DMH11. It's got
Yeah.
an antibiotic resistant marker in it.
Oh my God.
Now, India
Why an
leads.
antibiotic? Why an
Let
antibiotic
me
marker?
just tell you the story. Let me tell you the story.
Yeah.
India leads in antibiotic resistance. We are one of the first countries where our population is resistant to a whole series of antibiotics. There's another thing, and it hasn't been challenged, I think it's been proven, that herbicides lead to antibiotic resistance. The herbicides themselves give what is called immediate resistance. In other words, if your cat goes to a field which has just been sprayed by a herbicide. I'm not saying glufosinate, it could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
Then antibiotic resistance, normally you need a period of time, like penicillin resistance. You need a period of time for antibiotic resistance to set in. This can be immediate. You're suddenly into the body suddenly is resistant to antibiotics in general. This
No,
is how critical it's becoming.
no, I didn't get to get understand this. How can a herbicide cause antibiotic resistance?
Because that's what is contained in herbicides. It's causing antibiotic. It's got an antibiotic resistant marker
In the herbicide?
in the herbicide. I've just told
Oh
you.
my
It's
God.
got an
Oh my.
antibiotic resistant marker.
But
Mustard has an anti.
but why are they doing this?
Now, you ask the government that. Don't ask me. I'm fighting them.
No,
I'm
I
asking
mean, even
questions.
even logically, you
Doing. I'll tell you why they're doing it. I'll tell you why. There's a huge conflict of interest. The Department for Biotechnology funds Pentel's mustard, funds it. There you have your answer.
so, but then this is being done by the government agencies themselves in India.
Of course, of course. And the
It's,
Department for Biotechnology, which is part of the regulator, actually funds Pentel's mustard. So where are we?
so, who funds the Department of Biotechnology?
The government of India.
No, but I'm sure there are some channels where the funding is coming from.
No, no, that may be. What I don't know, I don't know. I'm
Okay.
sure there are people who can go back and find that their Monsanto inputs, whatever, but I don't know. But the government, this is a government agency. We don't need more than that.
Yeah. So I have two questions here. Interestingly, this is Mr. Disco from Costa Rica. He's saying since this is happening worldwide, uh, I'm here in Costa Rica and having such conversations. Is there a way to unite our legal fights across countries aside from via the UN organizations?
I mean, I'm intrigued that he should say aside from and via the UN organ because they are probably the worst NGO that exists at the moment who are virtually funded by the pharmaceutical agencies. So the UN is completely bought over.
So
The
he's not.
WHO, the
In fact,
WHO is a funded pharmaceutical funded agency.
right. No, but his question was, without involving the UN, can we all
How,
try to come together? That is
how do
what is.
we? I would love to know how. We would have to. We would have to approach individual prime ministers, find out what the strong links are between country A and country B and country C. It would be virtually impossible.
Oh my God. And so there is one more very. Why is Indian government not pushing desi seed and organic farming?
Ah, now pushing in a very big way. The left doesn't understand. On the one pushing organic farming, they are, and on the other hand, they're trying to push GMO crops. This is a contradiction of the Indian government. We must ask them this question. Society must ask this question.
Yeah. And then one more question is, it's not a question, it is kind of a statement by Mr. Hitesh Ramane. He says Bill Gates is funding everything. And even I have a question, Aruna ji, that is, uh, are these companies which are pushing for the GMOs or manufacturing the GMOs or the GM crops, are they also the ones who are the pharmaceutical industry? Are they both the same?
Uh,
Or is
they
there a
have
connection?
a link. They have a link, certainly. They're not necessarily the same. But the
Mhm.
link is Bill Gates. He funds both the pharmaceutical industries and he's pushing GMOs, as you know, into Africa.
And into India also.
Of course, into India. He has funded Gavi and all kinds of Indian agencies. I mean, there's a whole list of people that we can networks that we can show you if you're interested of the conflict of interest that there is
Yeah.
between the pharmaceuticals, the vaccines, the WHO, and GMO crops.
So
Because the
could they?
seed companies are also the same. The seed companies are also the same.
So the
So
seed
you've got
companies and
this.
the pesticide companies and the pharmaceutical
That's
industry
right.
is
All
it is
linked.
all linked.
All linked.
So
All linked.
certainly, first, when we don't have the option of growing our own food because we don't have our seed thanks to the GMOs, then we are pushed, or rather, we are compelled to eat only that food. We may fall sick, and then the pharma industry benefits.
That's right.
And through the herbicides,
And
also,
if
we
we
may
die, whoever is left, they think
they are the boss.
cloud.
Would you like to talk about that? The agenda?
Uh, I think it might be straying too far, but I think
Okay.
it's a dangerous situation to allow GMOs in here, and we must, with all our might, all our strength, we must fight this.
So
I would
there are
ask our farmers to please.
some very interesting questions here. One Dhananjaya, he says there are many eminent scientists who are supporting HT mustard. Why is there no consensus among scientists themselves? Is ethics playing a dividing role? Very interesting question.
We've got as I said, we have a very serious conflict of interest and a conflict of interest to the scientist arena. They are not above, just because you're a scientist, doesn't mean that you're not corrupt. You can be corrupted. And we know this from the vaccine story, the pharmaceuticals, the fact that your doctors get free medicines, then they prescribe it to their patients. No one is above corruption unless you've got a straight soul in your body. You need to
Wonderful.
be incorruptible when it comes to integrity.
That's great. That's a great statement. Now, one more question is one Mr. Narsimha Reddy says, one section of the people will say that GM mustard developed by an Indian scientist working in a university with government funded research, unlike earlier ones developed by MNCs, could be better or could be in the interest of the public.
I find that an extraordinarily irrational statement. If
No,
something
there
is
are people
black,
who talk like that. There are people
I'm
who
giving
talk
you
like
the
that.
answer. If something, I'm giving you the answer. If there's something that's black, whether it comes out from a government agency or whether it comes from a multinational, it remains black.
Right, exactly. Because I remember hearing this kind of argument years ago when someone said, if we want GMOs, why not Indian GMOs, and why only?
We don't
Uh,
want it. We don't want
yeah, no,
GMOs.
I
It's
mean this kind of argument was sounded years ago, and then science teacher, how to convince people about the GM mustard conspiracy, because he says in science we teach, he's a science teacher who says in science we teach students benefits of hybridization. Now, being an awakened person and a science teacher at the same time, how can I convince people about the GM mustard conspiracy?
But what has hybridization got to do with GM mustard? You can have non-GMO hybrids and they out-yield your mustard. In fact, what I would like to say is that the mustard trials were absolutely illegal because one of the protocols for trials is you must have a hybrid to compare against a hybrid. They had
Right.
no GMO hybrid, they deliberately left it out. It makes all those trials illegal.
So they
Hybrid must
actually
be
downplayed.
tested. Hybrid must be tested against hybrid. You've got your DMH11, it must be tested against non-GMO hybrid. It was never done. Never done. So that whole testing protocol called BRL trials was illegal.
I think PM Modi knows everything. Okay, we'll not go into the politics of it. Uh, or would you like to comment on that?
No, because I don't know.
You
I
don't know, right?
can't. And I wouldn't comment on open television on something I don't know. And
Right.
this center. Yeah.
Right. So we have had a very good discussion. Many people are saying that are there any other GMO? As even strawberry seeds are brought from California. So are these GMOs?
I'm not sure about strawberries, but we've got soya bean.
Yes.
All the soya oil that is imported into India is GMO soya.
Mm.
There's no question about it. We've got, there's cotton, of
Even the
course,
corn also. The
and we've
corn.
got corn. Sorry, thank you for reminding me. Corn oil is virtually all GMO from the United States,
Yeah. Not
not
just
from
the
other
oil.
countries.
Not just the oil.
No, I'm
Some
talking of corn. I'm talking of
the
corn
sweet corn.
from
The
the
sweet corn.
United States. Yeah, yeah, corn cob from the
Yeah.
United States is GMO. Is GMO.
Because I remember once when I first time ate the sweet corn which is sold on the streets, I really ended up having a very bad stomach upset.
No, no, Saraswati, there is a difference.
Okay, that's what.
The sweet corn that is sold on Indian whatever is not
Mhm.
necessarily GMO unless the seeds are imported and given to the farmers are GMO. We don't know this.
We
In
don't
fact,
know.
I don't know that I do not know that it's GMO. I
I'd like
think
to share here.
it's just ordinary sweet corn variety, not
Mhm.
GMO. But
So
very
somebody.
soon it might be, and we will not know.
So I want to share here one example that is in because I've been farming for the last 12 years. So once my neighboring farmer, they do plant corn. So once he had planted corn, normally in Telangana, they plant corn and tur dal, the red gram pigeon pea together. And so this guy, he used herbicides to remove the weeds. The pigeon pea died.
Naturally.
So,
Naturally.
so I was getting this doubt could this be a herbicide tolerant HT corn, which is the rounded
It
ready
could be.
corn?
It could be. He may have got it surreptitiously.
I
It
mean, he
could
doesn't
be.
know. He doesn't know because the
No,
farmers didn't
then
know.
no, then it's unlikely because if he did, if he would have been careful spraying. If he didn't plant HT corn, he would have sprayed very carefully, and the corn may have survived.
No, my question is this farmer
Um,
may not know because these are all illiterate farmers.
so
They were
that's
just
why, if his corn, did it die or did it not die? That's
no,
the
the
question.
corn was fine. The pigeon
In
pea
that
died.
case, it sounds as though it is a GM corn,
Exactly. That's what I
HT corn.
had observed.
And
So
he
this is
probably didn't know. He didn't
yeah.
know that he'd been given an HT corn.
Aruna ji, the ground level, the grassroots farmers have no knowledge about. They are just planting BT cotton. They don't even know the name of the seed which they buy. When I ask them, do you know? They just say, no, I went to the shop. That guy said, this is a good seed. It will give me high yield. And so I brought it. That's as simple. And in such a country, they're bringing in all these complicated, complex technologies. And without, like, I think in your presentation you had made that no biosafety regulations are in place in the country, and how dangerous it is to introduce all this. Has they? I mean, when you're saying that the trials have been illegal, I think something you mentioned, even the right in the
The
briefing.
comparator, the
Yeah, the
comparator crop, you
yeah,
have to have the right comparator crops to do your field trials.
right.
If you've got a hybrid mustard, that the comparator crop has to be a specific non-GMO hybrid, and then you can compare the yields.
And they have
The
not done.
fact is today our varieties are out yielding Pentel's mustard.
Okay. And
Even with the our
who's this?
varieties, our straight line varieties are out yielding Professor Pentel's DMH11.
Who
With
is
all
this
the cooked
Professor
up,
Pentos?
Professor Pentel is the developer of DMH11.
Because many people don't know, that's why. Because we've been
Sorry,
this.
Professor Pentel is the developer of this wonder crop called DMH hybrid HT mustard.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, one, I think we are almost done. About there are not many other questions, other than can there be some vegetarian and non-vegetarian GMO? Can can someone put it in the seeds? I mean, I don't know. I think maybe he's referring to these animal genes inserted into the normal food crops and all that. Maybe that's what it is. There are a lot of people who are pure vegans, who are vegetarians. Now his concern is, could there be a non-vegetarian food crop, you know the gene inserted
Well,
into a food
let
crop?
me let me give you some very an interesting answer to this.
Okay.
Do you know what happens to the worm in BT cotton or in
No.
any BT food crop? Normally, if a worm infests a plant, it'll crawl out. But if
Hmm.
you put in a resistant gene into the seed, then the
Hmm.
worm dies in the fruit. And when it comes to brinjal, because the worm is dark and brinjal is dark, you can't make out the difference. You will never be able to pick it out. You're eating worms, dead worms.
Oh my God.
Sorry to give you this ghastly piece of information, but that's the truth.
No, no, but not only that, even, I heard of these scorpion genes being used in
No, that's
tomatoes. Is that true?
I have no idea. They can
No.
use any gene. Probably is because the genes themselves don't have to be non-vegetarian.
Yeah, they could be
They
anything.
could be anything.
Can
It
you
could be
finally
anything.
Can you tell me a little bit on I know this is all about the GM mustard we're talking about, but in your write-up, you had also mentioned about the rice that was tested by the buyer's rice variety.
Right. Now,
Can you tell
rice,
me? Because
yes.
rice is such an important thing for all of us, right?
Rice is like mustard, a closed pollinating crop,
Right.
even more closed than mustard. Now, this is a very interesting example because about 10 years ago, maybe a little more, there was a single field trial done in Louisiana University in the United States. And they went the protocols. They were very, very careful.
Mhm.
And all of America's long grain rice became contaminated. It was
With just one,
tested with one field trial.
my
It was
goodness.
tested in a lab, and at 0.01%, they found the contamination. RT-PCR, by the way,
Hmm.
plants. They found contamination at a level of detection of 0.01%.
You mean to say,
Billions of dollars of exports had to be cancelled.
mhm.
Buyer settled out of court. I forget what the figure was, some vast number in millions, maybe a billion, I'm not sure. So don't quote me on this, I can't remember. But this is what happened with rice, and it was rice which was tolerant to glufosinate.
Oh my
It
God.
was a bio rice, and we've now got a bio mustard.
No, but imagine this could happen. If this is happening with mustard today, you can still choose not to eat a mustard baby, but you can't choose not to eat rice.
Correct.
Imagine, because they're
Correct.
planning the golden rice, they're planning all kinds of things.
Yes, absolutely.
And if
Absolutely.
so, definitely the HT crops are far more dangerous compared to a regular
Well,
GM crops. And, of course,
80% are HT worldwide, maybe a little more.
in
But
all crops, in all crops.
80% of the world planted area minimum is HT. And if you
So it's
combine both the rice, both the BT and the HT, it may be even more. I'm not quite sure what the figure is.
So one last question we'll take before we wind up. That is, this is one gentleman from somewhere, a sculptor. Do seed companies have an influence on whether or not farmers grow GMOs?
Of course, if you're contaminated in abroad, they make you sign contracts that you will not plant unless you pay royalties. In India, you can't do that because we've got small farmers. So you contaminate like the BT cotton, you have all these hybrids. They have no choice.
They're just planting what they get.
Our government doesn't support a choice.
Our government doesn't support our farmers.
No, not absolutely doesn't support our farmers.
So thank you so much, Arunaji. We have done, precisely more or less we covered most of the important matters. And before we wind up, anything you'd like to add, say to our viewers, to our activists, all the ground level volunteers?
Just if you can, at your own level, try and fight this at whatever level you can. Tell your friends, tell your farmers, give support to your farmers. Don't buy GM. If you don't put money where, you know, into their pockets, they will fail.
So one, okay, now we have one very last question. This is very important. How can the common man identify the vegetables grown, or the rather the GM vegetables?
You can't. You can't. You can't. Unless if it's not labeled, you won't know.
So we have to fight for the labeling. We have to fight.
No, you have to fight for non-GMO.
We have
And
to
when
fight.
it is imported from some country where they grow GMO, then you must say, we insist no GM content.
Oh, there is hope. Don't lose hope. All these are
Amit,
efforts. No,
no
this
GM
boy,
content.
this
No
gentleman,
GM content.
this gentleman is saying that then there is no hope. No, of course there is hope. That is why we are fighting.
Excuse me, shall I walk out of the Supreme Court? Don't say that.
No, no, no. We are doing a great job. Please, Mr. Manikam, don't lose hope. The whole purpose of doing these kind of shows is to educate more and more people. So we all add our little bits of power to ma'am, who's doing a great job, who's been fighting for the last almost 18 years now at it. And do chem okay, now we don't want to talk about chemtrails and harp and all that. That's a different subject. So right now it's a question of what we are going to eat. So what's on our platter? I think it's about time we all start thinking about every morsel that is going into our mouths and what we are eating, what we are, it's a question of your health, it's a question of everything. With the vaccines, at least there was something outside that we could fight and say no. But when it's food and when it's all contaminated, there's nothing that we can do. So in India, we are still fortunate that we have multiple varieties of food. And so let's not lose it, because that's the greatest treasure. We don't have to worry whether we went to moon or Mars or not. That's not important. What's important for each and every one of us is what kind of food are we eating every day. So friends, we will be doing more such programs to educate more and more. Next, on Saturday, we are going to talk to a veterinary scientist who has worked in the tribal areas, and she's going to talk about what has been the impact of the GMOs, especially the BT cotton, on the animal health. So you all can know, please. I know this is in English because ma'am, Aruna ji is not that well versed with Hindi, so she said I'm more comfortable in English. So kindly excuse us. There have been a lot of Hindi listeners who just come inside. So all those who are interested to know more, what is this? We'll talk about that later. Banshai, please, we'll talk later because we are almost through with this. Please text us and we will give you more information on what is this GMO. Um, do you want to still talk about that? He says, what is GMO? Can you please give a little help for?
I can give it to you in one sentence.
Right.
When it's an unnatural laboratory process when a gene is inserted into the DNA of the receiving host. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So they are trying to play God with nature, trying to,
Create
recreate.
products that nature never created. Yeah.
Yes, create.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we need to understand here is in nature, it is, even though there is a gene exchange, it happens between the same species, right? It doesn't happen across, like from the animals or insects into plants. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't cross species barriers. No.
It doesn't cross species
No.
barriers, and that is the major difference. Here we are trying to create a, we don't know, it's kind of a Frankenstein future if you're going to go for it. And yes, thank you, Amita Sangviji, the great work by Aruna ji. So ma'am, there are a lot of people, I think we need to do more talks with you so that more and more people can know your the great work that you have been doing. So thanks a lot, Arunaji, for joining us today. And friends, all those who are interested to do work on this, please join our area-wise groups, connect with our local activists. You can write to us. Please log into the Awaken India uh, website. It's www.awakenindiamovement.com. And if you need any flyers, we are here. We can supply you with the flyers with basic information which you can take out and share, because there has to be a huge public opposition to this. It's a question of each and every one of our food right, our health right, our existential rights. And so uh, please get in touch with us. Let us all make this into a huge movement, as it happened with 10 years, 12 years ago with the BT brinjal. People came out on the streets. Our farmers are struggling every day. They are not in a position to come out on the street. So it is for us, all of us as consumers, to come out and take a take this head on. So thanks a lot again, once again, Arunaji, for joining us, and I hope we see you more and more on our show. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for the opportunity, Saraswati. Thank you very much. Thank you.